Are you interested in deepening your spiritual awareness and discovering your true nature as divine? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Align with the Divine. With me, your host, Patricia Diorio, spiritual mentor, sacred storyteller, and professional intuitive. Join me and my amazing guests each week for a deep dive into the exciting world of spirituality. Align with the Divine will inspire you to embrace your innate power to create your reality. It will motivate you to move past your limited thinking, release your subconscious programming, and show you how to live in the present moment with clarity and focus. Get involved with the show. Send your email to patricia@patriciadiorio.com. This is Align with the Divine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Align with the Divine with me, Patricia Diorio, your host. And I love my work. As I say every single time, I am such a joy for me to be interviewing these amazing people. And today, you're going to meet my personal physician, Dr. James Kwako, Dr. Jim, I call him. He's an amazing fellow. He's written several books about healing. And, you know, the thing that I love most about Jim is that he is a doctor of allopathic medicine and a doctor of complementary medicine, an alternative healing. So he's a healer, along with this concept of him being a medical doctor. And most importantly for me, he's in the same conversation spiritually that I'm in. Align with the divine, that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience and creating our reality. So before you meet him, I just want to share with you that there is a new freebie that I have on my homepage of my website, alignwiththedivine.net. And it's a spiritual assessment that I compiled, which is an opportunity for you to see where you are in the litmus test of your spiritual life. Do you want to take a deeper dive and get more aware of the fact that you are a spirit being in a physical form? This assessment will give you where you land on a scale from 1 to 11. There's 11 questions, so you'll have an opportunity to have some food for thought around your spiritual life. And if you're willing to share your results with me, I'm happy to give you a complimentary discovery session, an opportunity for us to get together to discuss the results of your survey and also how I might help you. And also, I will give you a free tarot reading, a little mini reading that day, your life cards, giving you your life cards based on your birthday and the numbers in your birthday. That will give you a lot of information about yourself. So check it out. So Dr. Jim Kwako, he's a family practitioner. He's been practicing here in Santa Barbara for 30 years. And as I mentioned, he practiced integrative holistic medicine. He's also a minister at Santa Barbara, Unity Santa Barbara Spiritual Center here in Santa Barbara. He has taught for many, many years as an instructor for extended learning in the adult education program for Santa Barbara City College. And he is the author of 2 books, one called Mobilizing Your Healing Power, really able to tap into our own ability to heal ourselves and to send healing energy to others. And also his latest book, Healing Loss. And that's going to be about death and dying. He's very much involved in near-death studies. He's involved in the local organization here. And he has had many, many opportunities to interview people that have had near-death experiences. And he's going to share that work with us today as well. So enjoy this interview. I certainly will enjoy the conversation. Bye-bye. Well, Dr. Jim, I'm so delighted to welcome you to Align with the Divine, my new podcast. And I'm really excited about sharing with you today about your brand new book, Healing Loss, your second book. And I can't wait to get into that with you. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'd like to begin by asking you to give, as an integrative medicine doctor, you have quite a proficient and eclectic background in medicine. Would you please give us an introduction? How did you get started? How did you move in the direction of integrative medicine as opposed to being a more traditional allopathic MD?
Well, it must have been part of my innate process here because from early time before medical school, I was drawn to knowing that my main mission was going to teach people how to be healthy. And so I was drawn to a variety of experiences that were fascinating. When I was in I think my second year of college, I was in pre-med, of course, and I was taking a weights and isometrics class. And one of the requirements was to write a book report. And so I just happened to see a book called The Aerobics by Ken Cooper. And he was just starting a huge career on making exercise practical and documenting the value of it so that the average person undertaking any of a variety of exercises would know exactly how much to do to be optimally healthy. And it was marvelous. He quantified how long you'd have to walk and how much distance you'd have to cover. And he did that with swimming, jogging, bicycling, all kinds of things. And it made so much sense to me. But I saw myself in a role of wanting to learn about and provide basic ways of being healthy. This was not part of the conventional approach, as obvious as it may seem. Of course, this is now over 50 years ago that I'm in pre-med and early medical school. And I remember, oh gosh, how long? Maybe 15 years ago, going to a national meeting on hypertension, which is very common diagnosis, and asking the main speaker, Lehrer, just a top hypertension expert in the country at the time, why he didn't talk about exercise during his whole talk on treating hypertension in practical ways. And he said, oh, Dr. Cooper's doing that. And I thought, well, that's crazy, because the people attending a conference like this should be knowing about it. And then the other thing that happened was I met a interesting podiatrist who was seeing kids with learning disorders, and he was doing a group process of helping them. He had a nutritionist, marriage and family counselor, social worker, registered nurse, a couple other people involved, and it was a group process, and it was fascinating. I thought, well, this is the way medicine should be practiced. I didn't know much about medicine. I wasn't even in medical school yet, but I had a yearning to consider the practical suggestions people would need. And so I became interested in Edgar Casey, and he was considered the father of holistic medicine by the New England Journal of Medicine somewhere in 1970, 1978, something like that. And I got in on the ground floor of that type of thing. I ended up having a marvelous experience meeting a neurosurgeon at Virginia Beach. He was giving a talk on autogenics, relaxation, and hypnosis. And I thought, oh my God, this is fascinating. A neurosurgeon's actually talking about this. And in any event, I met him. We hit it off really quickly. I went up to him at the first lunchtime. He said, let's have dinner too. And within about 3 or 4 days, he was asking me to go into practice with him. I was right out of my medical training. And while I was with him, he started the American Holistic Medical Association.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And so while I was with him, we had the first 2 of the annual meetings. And we attracted physicians from all around the country who had an interest in this. We had 400 to 500 gathering together, and local communities at that time. This is in the late 1970s. Fascinating.
Wow.
And so the primary emphasis was nutrition, exercise, stress management, meditation, spiritual aspects of it. That it all made sense to me. I was raised in a church, and of course I respected spirituality at the time, and so that was a natural part of it.
What church were you raised in?
I was raised Catholic.
You were raised
I was a good altar boy and a choir boy, and
I can see that.
The whole thing right at home on the altar, and learned the Mass in Latin by heart and all that type of thing, and it was fascinating. In fact, we just had an Easter ceremony recently where the choir is learning the Mass in Latin which we haven't done for a long time. But a lot of that is coming back into me now too. Glory to
Wow.
God in the highest. And of course, there's
Through a Catholic church in the community?
where I was raised.
Oh, where you were raised. Yeah. Oh, okay. But you
Sure.
said it's happening now.
Oh, well, in the choir of the church that I'm going to, we're putting on a spring concert in a couple of weeks.
Oh,
And the choir director,
you're talking about unity.
yes, I'm
Oh,
talking about
okay.
unity.
All
Yes,
right.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. So just so people can get a sense of this, if they're just tuning in now, how would you define integrative or integrative, however you want to pronounce it, holistic medicine? How would you define that succinctly?
Well, integrative medicine is integrating a number of different approaches to being healthy. And of course, that means concerns about the physical body, how we use it, what we feed it, what substances we take, what supplements we take, how we move it, how we exercise it, where we go with our body, how we use our body. And then, of course, the whole body of emotions. I mean, there's a wide body of positive feelings about things, of negative feelings about things, and sometimes those are easy categories to work with. But our emotional body has a huge role in terms of our physical body. And to me, this was innately made sense. I almost took a second major in psychology in undergrad and wanted to learn as much as I could. I knew it was an important factor. And then the mental factor goes beyond the emotions, how we think, ideas we have, how we organize things, the memories that we have, how we set forth ideals, how we use the mind to reach for higher aspirations of living, and then the spiritual aspect of it. Integrative medicine, the way it's generally practiced, is probably based more on physical attention, nutrition, and supplement use than any of these other aspects I'm mentioning. But the ideal definition would include body, mind, spirit medicine. Holistic medicine was the term prior to integrative. And that was used for a while, wasn't considered quite grounded enough for the medical community. The medical community now embraces, however, the whole aspects of integrative medicine. It is now a specialty that just started up in the last 5 years. So
Yeah.
you can go to University of Arizona in Tucson Medical Center. They have a integrative medicine residency program. You can become a resident now. So it's now very official.
Wow, that's
But the
wonderful.
original seeds of it started way back when. And holistic was one of the first terms in which it was mentioned. In Europe, it's been known as traditional medicine for a long time. Oh, over 100 years, 150 years. They would incorporate old wives' tales, herbs of various kinds. And so it's slowly grown into a modern form. Actually, in England, then they created a form about 30, 40 years ago called complementary medicine,
Complimentary.
which was pretty safe to use. That never quite took off here in this country. And so, but integrative medicine is the current term for what it is. And so it's recognizing that there's a field of healing beyond the field of medicine.
Yes.
Its primary emphasis is still on physical medicine, helping people improve the physical body through physical means of improvement. It would include awareness about acupuncture, about homeopathy, body therapies of different kinds, osteopathy, all of these types of things.
And you studied those, didn't you? As
I
complementary to
studied them
that?
all to some extent. I became skilled at using and still do acupuncture for pain relief. I became semi-skilled in using homeopathy for a wide variety of symptoms. I don't do that quite so much anymore. I learned how to massage. I took a training course from Riley, who was one of the main people that Edgar Casey referred people to in New York City. And he was just retiring when I first met him. He tried to retire 3 times, and then he taught a class on massage. And the simplest lesson he gave on massage was the real spirit of healing massage is simply rubbing people the right way. You learn how to rub people the right way, and your massage will be helpful to them.
Metaphor,
But
that's a great metaphor. So let me ask you this. In the beginning, you were interested in it right away, even before you went to medical school. So did you suffer any discrimination, let's say, as a holistic physician early on, or before people even knew what holistic medicine was?
No, I didn't. I'm not sure what was whispered behind the scene. I know that ridicule was mentioned in reference to my name once I came to Santa Barbara, but I never received any directly. And I became aware of this with training with physicians who were well grounded with what they did. The neurosurgeon I worked with he actually stopped doing surgery so that he could specialize in chronic pain management and help to facilitate other physicians moving into chronic pain management as a specialty. It's still not a recognized specialty, but nonetheless, he trained many physicians how to handle those with chronic pain. And he knew how to ground what you had to say and what you taught with conventional medicine and the data behind it, the studies behind it, and yet also knew how to reach beyond that and incorporate other elements that had some documentation in terms of massage, in terms of meditation, and the research that was being done. So I learned from him how to put this together in an authoritative, principled, scientific way, and that helped. But when I was doing one of my residencies in holistic medicine in Phoenix, Arizona, I also had a marvelous chance to work with a husband-wife team, Bill and Gladys McGarry. And I watched them, how they interacted. And one of the things that stood out the most, however, was that they established themselves in the community as a responsible, competent physician. They didn't go elaborating and broadcasting and trying to convince people about something outside of the usual way of doing things, especially among their colleagues. And I noticed that. I paid attention to that. And when the Holistic Medical Association began to be formed, I was quite aware of the fact that some physicians were being isolated, exposed, and then actually a great deal of pressure was put on them. Some of them lost their licenses because they promoted themselves as doing not quite miraculous works, but they seemed to be overly critical of their colleagues and the field of medicine in general. And I think that exposed them to more attention than they ended up wanting to have, I suspect. And then once you start getting people studying carefully and trying to document you're doing everything perfectly well, you find out a few mistakes can lead you into trouble. So I was never focused on in that way, and I didn't go out of my way to try to convince those not interested how to do it.
You didn't bring attention to it. Well, you've written 2 books now, and I remember you were on my television show many years ago, and you talked about your first book. And that book was about healing, as this new one is. We're going to get to that in a moment. But what inspired you to write that first book on healing? Did you have your own healing experiences personally, or perhaps with your patients, that inspired you to write that book? Do you have a copy of it? Do you have a copy of it there, Jim?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
But I did go through some back pain in high school. I injured my back doing something, twisting, turning at the same time, playing probably flag football, and ended up going to a chiropractor. And then in college, I ended up playing volleyball and twisted my back again and went to a chiropractor again. And I ended up going to an orthopedic surgeon and asked him what he thought about chiropractic. He couldn't be more critical. And it was unfortunate because I had already experienced benefit from going there. And in fact, in medical school, I guess I was isolated at one point because the first year of medical school, I did start talking about chiropractic as a potential viable modality or field of medicine that we should learn about. And we had a spontaneous meeting by the dean at one point, about 5 or 6 months into the first year of medical school. And nobody knew exactly what it was for. It was 12 noon. And all of a sudden, the dean shows up, and then he starts hemming and hawing and says, I understand some of our students are talking about chiropractic. And I'm just here to tell you that, of course, we do not support that. We don't think it's scientific. We don't think it should be used by people with so little training in medicine. And he went on like that. The only person that was talking about was me. and I was sharing it with some other people interested in what they knew or didn't know. But I suspect I was fingered at that point. Fortunately, it didn't interfere with my finishing school where I was. But actually, the teaching began earlier. I had a wonderful, I was very inhibited in getting up in front of a group when I was young. In high school, one of my favorite memories was at the end of the first year finding out that you could graduate from high school and it wouldn't be compelling for you to take speech class. For some reason that I felt inhibited about that. But in any event, I ended up taking a grant in medical school. They had a psychiatry grant. During the first year, I learned about it. And what I really wanted to do was to research Edgar Casey, the father of holistic medicine. He wasn't referred to at that point, but I was starting to see that he had a broad view of healing that went far beyond medicine and incorporated the whole body of feeling, the whole body of mind. He even talked about past lives as referring to credible ways of documenting sources, causes of problems, also sources of healing that we gather in that way. But in any event, that was denied. The psychiatrist looked on me in a very strange way when I started asking about the potential for doing such a research project in the summer. So I and a friend got together. I was taking classes in psychology, and I read Bruno Bettelheim's book about how we could raise children with the kibbutz model from Israel. So I presented to him doing a project studying how kids were raised, and it was accepted by a psychiatrist. He thought that was a marvelous idea. And when I came back, I had to report on what we found, what we learned. And it was so fortunate, synchronicity at work. I ended up at the 7th International Child Psychiatry Conference in Jerusalem while I was just visiting there for the first time. And I got in on a whole day of the way they were talking about how the kids were raised. In any event, I came back and reported on that. I gave an excellent talk, the first talk I'd ever given, and this was to the medical class. And it was very well received. I just felt very proud of my ability, but I ended up then working with Norm Shigley, the neurosurgeon, and we had 12-day sessions working with people with chronic pain using a holistic approach to them. And all of the faculty, all of us on the staff, were expected to give talks about different topics to the people who were there. We had a 12-day session. And so I learned how to become very comfortable speaking about a wide variety of aspects of it. And then when I moved to Santa Barbara, I began to teach as an instructor at the City College Adult Ed program.
Right.
And I began to teach regularly. Well, after several years, various students would start asking me, well, why don't you write a book about this? And so I put together many of the talks that I gave as an instructor, and that became the foundation for the first book, Mobilizing Your Healing Power.
Mobilizing Your Healing Powers. Now, it seems to me that it would be a rather significant jump even to go from there to Edgar Casey. I mean, when I think of Edgar Casey, Edgar Casey's an incredible mystic, and it would seem that there was a jump there. How did you find that? Were you able to close that gap and bring Edgar Casey's work into your practice?
Well, I learned how to integrate a fair amount of this when I was working with the neurosurgeon right after my training. I did a 6-month residency in Phoenix, Arizona. So they talked about acupuncture and meditation and things. But with Norm Shigley for 4 years, he showed me how to integrate meditation, relaxation. Of course, here's people with chronic pain. So we started with simple relaxation exercises. But eventually, during the 4 years I was there, he developed a small suitcase of tapes that people had to do homework with, starting with the simplest exercises, autogenic training, and then other simple relaxation exercises. And then we slowly introduced visualization, and then meditation, and then self-healing, and then sending healing to those we love and those we care for, those with whom we're having stress, and how to heal relationships with meditation and relaxation exercises. So he showed me how to integrate that, and that made a big difference. Yes, it took a while to learn how to do that, but I felt comfortable from the beginning to speak authoritatively about these. And I always had a few statistics in the back of my mind relating it to studies, scientific studies that were done. And that seemed to help make it easier for some people.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, I reviewed your book last night, Healing Loss, your new book, Healing Loss, Healing the Loss of a Loved One, and how those who leave us how those who leave us help us heal. It's a beautiful book, and I highly recommend it for people. You know, we had Easter, and you know, death and transformation. This just happened 2 days ago. And I don't know about you, but it seems to me that the conversation around death is much more in the mainstream or prevalent today. And maybe it's just my perception, but it seems like people are more interested in death and moving to this place of less fear around death and more of this understanding of death as, you know, a doorway to another experience. But of course, this smacks of reincarnation and the soul going on, you know, so a lot of people could be very resistant to this. But I love your approach. And you were interested in this. When did you get interested in this whole death conversation from the standpoint of IANDS? And IANDS is the International Organization of Near-Death Experiences?
Yes, it is. It was actually started by some followers of Ray Moody. Ray Moody had a near-death experience before going into medical school. He went to medical school for the primary purpose of learning more about how people died. He already knew what it was like to pass out of the body and almost die and came back. He learned from a physician in Virginia called Ritchie. I don't recall his first name, but he wrote a book about it, and he was entranced by it, had his own, and that helped explain the experience he had. And then he studied it. Some followers then created the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And now there are state chapters all around the country, all around the world. Dr. Moody ended up speaking all over the place and created a huge atmosphere that was much more receptive than before. He grounded it in the various ways that he could and met many people who were very interested and pursued it in a very serious manner and shared his stories. And actually, he did not embrace himself as being an expert on what happens after we pass until many years afterwards. And he finally was deluged with a dramatic experience with one individual who came to him. And there's actually a doctor and a patient. And he was so impressed that finally he said, you know, I just can't deny it anymore. I better speak directly. But I think it was partly his humility, partly his science background that kept him from overstating what's exactly happening when people die, that made it more acceptable to people he spoke to. But that helped create the atmosphere. Of course, the other psychiatrist from Chicago who talked about the 5 major steps of dying, Kubler-Ross, also created an atmosphere. She did it strictly through psychiatry and the grief, the anger, the acceptance, the various steps of confronting death. And so she certainly should be considered one of the pioneers in opening up awareness that death is a unique event that we should pay attention to.
Right.
And so then Ray Moody's material came out, and then many other people started talking about it. My own personal interest began by reading the Edgar Casey material, because he talked about it as so common. And so it became common to me, like the 4 seasons, you know, spring, summer, winter, fall, life, death, afterlife, rebirth. You know, it just made sense to me. And so eventually I think that's the way the public will pick up with it. And so
well, how did you reconcile reincarnation with Catholicism?
Oh, well, you know, I wasn't quite in the Catholic Church at the time. And so I wasn't an obedient, absolutely following all the rules at the time. But I came across many references. I didn't have too much trouble with that, but it's been a slow process. I'm only aware of hints of past lives, but I've met people who are very skilled at accessing this. And when you hear their stories, you begin to realize, well, I have no way of proving this with my own questions or with my own entering into what's being spoken to. But the depth of common sense that it made to me registered. How to explain certain illnesses that people are born with, how to explain certain serious chronic conditions that became the focus of a whole lifetime, how to explain certain accidents that happened and then caused certain problems. I'm convinced there are accidents. I'm convinced that most of the problems that we face in this life are a result of poor decisions, immaturity in this lifetime. But nonetheless, it has become so compelling, and certain stories make so much sense. And when you hear people share certain stories about a previous lifetime, you begin to wonder. I remember one of the two prominent stories from Edgar Casey, if you want to hear about that.
Sure. I want to hear
Okay.
about that. And I also want to hear your personal encounter with death. I think it was related to your dad.
Yes,
Yeah, I'd
yes.
love to hear that story too. But go ahead and tell us the stories that Edgar Casey told you.
Well, let me start with my own dad first.
Okay, sure.
Because it was a personal experience, and it was probably the strongest experience. It was the strongest experience I had of someone on the other side. It was a shared death experience, I'm finding out now. I actually had an impulse of, on the spur of the moment, wanting to go visit him. I was in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was in Bismarck, North Dakota, where I was raised. And I thought, oh, gee, Labor Day's coming up. I've got a long weekend. Wouldn't it be nice? So I called with only a few days' notice. He said, great, sure. Why don't you come? Mom's not here, but we'll have a good time. It was, my dad picked me up at the airport, took me, we got into the house, we sat down and talked. And for the first 20 minutes, all he talked about was love. I had never known him to just emphasize that. And we had a wonderful weekend. It was my favorite time, the only time I can remember when I was just with him alone, actually. Maybe in early childhood, I had four siblings, so we didn't have a small family, and I was near the end of the train of children, so his time was occupied. In any event, when I was leaving, he said, "I hope you'll come hunting with us." And I said, "Well, I've lost my interest in doing that." He had to hunt to put food on the table when he was young, but in any event, I didn't quite get caught up in that the same way. But I loved going out, but this particular time I chose not to. I got a call 3 months later. My older brother called me at 1 in the morning. He said, "Jim, there's been an accident. Dad has died." And it turned out that I said, "Okay, well, I'll be there in the morning." And so there was a plane leaving in 5 hours from La Crosse, a puddle jumper to the Twin Cities. And so it turns out I was the only one scheduled on the flight. And I'm walking back and forth in the lobby area, waiting to board. And all of a sudden, my dad was with me. I didn't see him, but I felt his presence so real, like you sitting there, even closer. He was happier than I'd ever seen him. He was joyful. He was so proud of the life he had lived and the children he had raised, the souls they had brought in. And he shared with me the highlights of his life. But I was so strongly compelled with a strong sense of joy I had never felt before. And it was marvelous. Then I found out later what had happened. Here he was, 5 days hunting with the oldest brother and sister, my oldest brother and sister. At the end of the fifth day, the sun's starting to go down, and you can't shoot after the sun goes down. One lone duck comes over, which is rare. They're always come in groups, pairs, or flocks. And he gets the duck, and they hoop it up, and then they have to put the decoys away. He hands the last decoy to my sister, and he falls over. My brother's a pediatrician, my sister's a nurse, they do CPR, he doesn't recover. He had told us for years, when I go, it'll be with my boots on. By boots, he meant wading boots for duck hunting. And that's what he had. He had his wading boots on. It was quite remarkable. And
Wow.
so he's sharing this with me, and I know it's real. I share it with the family. They're thrilled to know about it. They believed in this type of thing. They didn't have a personal experience with him at the time, and some of them did afterwards, within a matter of days or weeks later. But
so what this was, so you were in the airport waiting to board your plane, and it was just this presence of your father that was there. I mean, you didn't actually see an apparition of him
right,
or communicate with him. You communicated telepathically or energetically, right?
he knew I was picking up what he was saying. He knew I was aware of his presence. I couldn't recall too many more details, but he shared with me the highlights. He was not only smiling broadly within my mind, but the energy with him was so tremendously uplifting. It was really, really quite remarkable. Yes. And the fascinating thing about experiences like this, mine and others I've heard from other people, is the memory is so clear that when you start talking about it, it's recreated in almost as clear a sense. And so it's not like the memory of a dream. It's not like the memory of visiting with someone and trying to recall exactly what happened. The intensity goes far beyond the usual interaction with someone.
Oh, that's amazing. And you want to share a couple of, or one story from Edgar Casey before I go on?
Well, there are many. Actually, a more practical story to share happened to my mother-in-law.
Sure.
She was beginning to lose her health and reach the point that she had trouble socializing very much, had to cut off her social connections, became weaker, having a chronic dizziness, a few other symptoms, became diagnosed with congestive heart failure, and so she was beginning to pass, and I began to talk to her about what to expect on the other side. And at one point, I said to her, "Your family and friends who passed over will be there. They'll show you around. There'll be a celebration." And she said, "No, no one for me." And oh, I felt her sadness. And I said, "No, there's someone for everybody. Nobody dies alone. Nobody dies. Everybody has someone. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but nobody is alone in the process." And so then it turns out about, a few months later, she wakes up from a dream, but more than a usual dream, in which she was seeing somebody, a man that she felt very close to, didn't recognize, she'd been married twice, didn't recognize him, but was so intensely close to, it was as though she was wanting to share her whole life, and he was too. There was this kinship, and he was showing her a house and said, "This is where you'll come, but not yet." And so she wakes up, shares this with her daughter, my wife, and in the process, we knew immediately that, oh my gosh, this is a friend who's going to be there when she passes. And who knows whether she's a spirit guide with her now or simply an old friend from the past. And sure enough, her passing was sweet and fine and simple and without too much suffering. And so we're hopeful she was taken care of. But I think this is an experience that many people may hear about and may be reassuring to them. I hope so.
Mhm.
But my book is filled with many experiences. Most of them are in this sense of being something that could happen to any of us.
So, it's said that the suffering and the pain is really for those that are left behind, not for, it's like the grieving. Well, let me give you an example. My granddaughter, I don't know if you remember this, died at 19. Yeah. It'll be 3 years in July. And 19 years old, an embolism out of the blue, which resulted in a massive stroke, which took her cognitive and motor abilities. 2 weeks after she went into the hospital, we had to put her on hospice because she was just going to be a vegetable. I mean, it was just so stunning that, it's utterly heartbreaking. And I remember reading in your book that the tears come when they come. They still come for me. But as my son has been, they were just like this. They were so close. He raised her. And they were just the most amazing father and daughter.
Oh.
And I almost don't know how to be there for him except just to send him love and lift him up and hold him in my love and my heart. Because even almost 3 years later, I don't think a parent ever gets over losing a child. What do you say? What do you say about that?
Well, I think it depends on how it's done. It depends who you seek out to get reassurance. It depends how you work through the process. It depends whether you really highlight the gift they were to you when they were with you. And you really need to highlight the favorite memories you've had, and not just think about them for a few moments, but dwell on them in a quiet time for an extended period of time, because in the process, you awaken a connection with their inner being. And when you do that, you begin to awaken the inner knowing that life is continuous, that there is continuity from this life to the next.
Yeah.
And so I've met many who have worked on this, and it's not an easy process, but there's various ways that we work our way through this. And that's a marvelous thing about Suzanne Giesemann and many others who have developed the skill of communicating with those on the other side. Suzanne's story is marvelous. Should I share a few comments about that or not?
Yeah, yes, no, do. I think stories are really the way that we learn most appropriately because we can relate to other people's stories. I just wanted to share one thing before you did that around my Bella. My son's lady is working with a psychic, an intuitive and a medium in Switzerland. She had worked with her for many years. She was her spiritual teacher. And we contacted her, and she said that when Bella went into a coma before she had the stroke, that her spirit, her soul already left her body, and that she went to what she called an astral realm, where she was in this astral hospital, making a preparation for her transition. And she told us that the spirit doctors actually brought Bella's soul to the hospital room to show her her body and to give her the opportunity to see what she would be coming back to if she decided to come back. And it was very clear that she did not want to come back. I mean, she was an artist and she was so excited about everything that she was experiencing. And this is what, of course, the medium told us. So is that, do you know anything about these hospitals, these astral realm hospitals where people go, or have you heard anything?
Well, I've heard references to this by other people. At one point in time, I visited a healing clinic on the other side, and I don't think that's quite the same setting, but I had a wonderful experience with that. And yes, those who have surprise loss of life, like hers was with COVID, and others who have terrible accident, and even many people who die slowly with cancer or heart disease, generally have to go through a special process of recovery on the other side.
Yes, that's what she said.
Yeah. And however, there are spirits there. There's many more souls on the other side than this side. Many volunteers of such. One of the most moving experiences like this happened to my sister. She was almost died from a deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot in her leg. And her son talked her into going to the hospital. She didn't think she was bad enough. She'd be better in the morning. And if she hadn't gone that night, she would have died. And that would have been difficult. She was she was in an open ICU. And they told her that the blood clot, about 2.5 feet long, had to be taken out. It was an unusual situation with the blood clot being that long. So they were strong.
How could you have a blood clot 2.5 feet long?
Well, up the leg. It's up the leg, and then small pieces break off and go into the lungs. And she was already having small pieces going into the lungs, and 25% of people die from pulmonary emboli, which is blood clots coming from the legs. In any event, she was worried about surgery because our older sister had a heart valve replacement and didn't recover from surgery. And so she's thinking, oh, this could be the end. And so she said goodbye to her son. But In the middle of the night, she wakes up, and on her bedside is our older sister and our mother. And our older sister, both of whom had passed, is gripping her hand very tightly. And of course, this was the huge cue to her. It really was our sister, because whenever you hadn't seen her for a while, she would sit down close to you. She'd sit on a couch. She'd say, "Come over here, Jim." And she'd grab your hand and hold it tightly until she heard everything that had happened since the last time she saw you. And so the two of them, she said, were concentrating on helping her remember that they were there. They knew that if she woke up from this nighttime event and remembered they were there, she would be reassured that they would be present and help her through the surgery. And that is what happened. But out of the corner of her eye, around every bed in the ICU, 5 other beds, she saw one or more spirits at the bedside of everyone there.
Isn't that wonderful?
Nobody was suffering alone. Nobody was going to be dying alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, what about this woman, Suzanne, her name was? Stephanie? No, what was her name? Eastman?
Suzanne Giesemann.
Suzanne Giesemann. Tell us about her story.
Well, she came here to Santa Barbara about 5 years ago as part of our International Association for Near-Death Studies chapter in Santa Barbara, which was started by Barbara Bartolome over 10 years ago. And Suzanne came in. Barbara would go to the annual meeting of this large organization and go up to the speakers and invite them to come to Santa Barbara. And she got hold of Suzanne and her husband. Suzanne is a retired commander from the Navy. And many years ago, she worked her way up in the Navy to become a top advisor of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She was in a plane with him in the middle of the Atlantic on the way to London when 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And so they had to turn around and go back. And in the process, they landed at Dulles Airport and then went to the Pentagon. By the time they got to the Pentagon, it had been hit by the third plane. They knew some of the people involved who were killed and injured. And so they were deeply involved in this dreadful tragedy. And she retired sometime after that. And then she was married to a retired captain of a destroyer. And he had a daughter in the Marines, 28 years old and pregnant. And she was struck by a bolt of lightning and was killed.
Oh, my.
Terrible tragedy in their family. But the spirit of that daughter-in-law, stepdaughter, visited her. It was the first time she had ever had an experience like this, but she knew it was real. It's like my experience with my dad. I knew it was real. And so she went searching for someone who could explain what happened and make further contact with this relative of hers. And she found someone, and it became her mentor. And eventually they developed a close relationship. She ended up talking with her stepdaughter several times. And then she was convinced to learn how to do this herself and went to a school in England for spiritualist training and learn how to commune with those on the other side. And so she was coming around. She had some books she had written. She's in Santa Barbara here. She gives a marvelous talk. It's a PowerPoint talk. She gives over 20 examples of people with whom she communicated with a loving family or friend on the other side. And the one I remember the most was when the spirit on the other side talked about, through Suzanne, remember me when I was a cheerleader and had buns on my head. And the mother right away says, "Oh, no, that couldn't be true. She was never a cheerleader." Well, Suzanne gets a letter from her a few weeks later with a picture of her from the mother with her cheerleading outfit. She was a cheerleader in grade school and had buns on her head. Oh, and so there it was.
Her hair was like in buns?
Yes. And so proved to the mother. But every time the spirit would communicate to try and prove their existence by coming up with something that only this family member or friend knew about. And the stories were so compelling. She gave, since then, she has tapped into her own inner wisdom and has a daily statement called The Awakened Way. It used to be The Daily Way. And it's free. And it's a marvelous statement. And sometimes it addresses directly how to pay attention to the life on the other side. And the words are soothing, they're comforting, they're uplifting, but they're real. I mean, it makes so much sense the way she talks about this. It's common language for her to talk about it, and it's reassuring still to me. I look at these almost every day and have passed several of these on to my patients. And so it's so convincing that there are people like this spreading the story. And so we need to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Oh, you know, the story that's always fascinated me was Eben Alexander's story. Did he ever come to Santa Barbara?
He came to Santa Barbara twice, and Barbara Bartolome in our chapter invited him and invited me to have lunch with him both times he came. And it was just marvelous because he's fully alert and conscious,
Oh,
no
yeah.
lapses of memory. He was told that his condition had no chance of survival intact, 95% die with E. coli of the brain. And if those who do recover do not have much use of their brain, he was fully alert. He was fully aware, and marvelous man. His courage of speaking about something so unusual, I think, is opening the door to research in the field of medicine. He was a researcher at Harvard for 15 years on neural research, breaking new ground, innovating approaches, and then has this experience. And so it helps legitimize the need in the eyes of physicians and scientists of various kinds, psychiatrists, psychologists, that this is a legitimate area of study because somebody from Harvard has told us a story about it. I'm sure physicians have been hearing stories about near death for a long period of time, but for various reasons did not follow through. Unfortunately, religion was not very helpful along those lines,
No.
I suspect. Neither was the field of science. But in any event, once you start hearing more of these, it's like a colleague of Dr. Alexander. Eben was sharing his story with a neurosurgeon. And while he's sharing the story, his friend's eyes drift away, and he right immediately assumes he's bored with the story I'm sharing. And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure I've gone too far." His friend immediately turns over to him and says, "No, that's not it. I finally understand what happened when I was with my dad as he was dying. He started talking to somebody who must have been my mother because he talked to her in the same warm, loving way that he did when she was alive. And now I understand what was going on. I had nothing to relate it to before. Now I have your story to relate it to. That's what you went through." And that's why we need to share our stories, because once we share them in an authentic way,
Yeah.
then other people begin to believe the possibility of it, and their stories become more real, and their access to these stories becomes more real.
Well, it's interesting because I'm familiar with Anita Morjani. I've heard her speak a couple of times. And Eben, I didn't hear him speak while he was here in Santa Barbara. I missed that. But I read his book. And I was surprised that his depiction of the afterlife began in the lower realms. Like he described, if you recall correctly, he described, like lower realms and then moving up to the different higher realms. Do you remember that? I mean,
Yes, for sure. He was in mud. He couldn't see. Everything was black. And then he saw a point of light, and he felt like he was deep in quicksand below the surface. And he ended up then seeing a tiny light that got brighter and brighter. It became associated with music, and then it ended up that he then was with this person and actually flying on the back of this person who looked like a huge butterfly or a winged being of some type,
an angel,
who ended up turning out to be, of course, a relative of his who died at an early age. And so that's called the bardo, but that's not really the lowest level. The lowest level is the fear, depression, anger, grief, guilt that we generate by mistreating those around us in this lifetime. That's the lowest level. The next level is the human level. And so he was simply separating from the body at that point. And it's darkness because outside the body, if you're not used to the light of the soul, the light of spirit, you go through this transition of outside the physical realm. And anyway, that's the way he described his journey out of the body, I think. But it was fascinating. It's well worth reading.
Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing book. Well, let's talk about heaven and hell here for a moment. People, I was raised Catholic also, and I think people that were raised in more traditional religions, particularly Christianity, have this idea of heaven up here, fabulous, and this hell down there where you burn forever and all the nasty things happen, like in Dante's Inferno. So how would you give our listeners and our viewers a definition of heaven and hell from your perspective today with all the work you've done around death?
Well, I had a marvelous experience with a good friend of mine who moved away a few years ago, and she started a near-death study group in Hawaii. And she shared the story of me with her sort of adopted mentor, adopted mother. This particular woman did not have any children. She was the daughter of the Chicken King, the fellow who
Yeah. I
started
remember reading that in your book. Yeah, Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And she
Sanders.
helped set up franchises around the world and became a mentor of my friend and looked up to immensely to help her understand some of her own difficulties and then to learn from this woman what other countries were like, what other things people were going through. She had an interesting life, no doubt about it. She died at the age of 92.
Wow.
And my friend was grieving her loss a few weeks after the passing, kind of dozing off, kind of grieving, and all of a sudden she heard, "Hi there, honey. How you doing?" "I'm doing wonderful. The only hell I've seen was living in that old body of mine." And so that was the voice of her friend, her mentor. And she knew who it was. And it was deeply reassuring to her that she was fine. She was being looked upon. And so it's so fascinating. There was a marvelous book called Into the Light by John Lerma, one of the first of the palliative care doctors before it was a specialty in, I think it was Houston, Texas, one of the Texas cities. And it's his story that there are many stories in his book, 12 chapters. Every story is a multidimensional story. And some of them tap into the business of what real hell is like. And it's the people who cause suffering to others by a choice of will, not by accident. It's not soldiers who go into battle killing people. There's a special exemption for those in terms of killing others. It's those who, in a determined way, either neglect those they're responsible for or abuse they're responsible for. That's what hell is. It's created by their own selfishness. And the sad part is these people have to work that through on the other side. No, there's not a place where there's fire and brimstone and somebody's in control of them. No. They have a relationship with their own life. And once they go through the various steps of forgiveness, of accepting forgiveness, of acceptance of what they've done, the missed opportunities they've had, and how they then vehemently aspire to do better with the next turn and the cycle. And they slowly work their way out that way. Yes, heaven and hell, it depends to what extent you use your skills, talents, determination, eagerness to help those around you, that determines how far up the ladder you move when you're done. You meet those who have passed on at the point of leaving, and often it's a wonderful experience for most people. Most of us do not accomplish everything we set ourselves out to do in this lifetime, but the vast majority of us make progress. And so we reach the point of appreciating the good we did, and that's what gets highlighted.
Yeah. Well, how I've developed my own understanding of heaven and hell is that it's not outside of here, that, we create our heaven here by where we are, by our perception in life, by how we live our life. We live a wonderful life, a happy life, a joyful life, a life filled with love. That's our heaven. And as we become more awake to this concept of being divine beings in human form, having a human experience, as we become more aware of that, our tendency then is to choose a wonderful life, to be vibrating at that high frequency of consciousness, as opposed to those that are not there, the Putins and the others, who are politically infamous, for what they have done, that they have, they create their own hell by their, how they live their lives. And of course, I think it makes total sense that karma is a real thing, that in another lifetime, our soul goes on to another lifetime, and we do have to balance out these deeds.
Yes, indeed. And there's some great stories about that. But I just want to make another brief point about the subtitle of my book, Those Who Leave Us Heal Us. Because my experience with asking people, ever since I've been in this near-death study group, is asking more and more people, if they ever mention the passing of a loved one in the office with me, by far most of the time I'll say, I hope you don't mind, but have you had any contact with them since they passed? And at times, there are very real experiences. Yes, my husband used to always just touch me on my cheek as I was going off to sleep at night. And he came by and he did the exact same
Yeah.
gesture.
Yeah.
And it made all the difference in the world to feel it. And so many of the people's experiences of meeting those who passed on are given the reassurance not only that their loved one is surviving but thriving, and not only that, but the joyfulness, the love, the acceptance, the uplift that comes with it. And so they come back to us hoping to be noticed, so that we will be reassured they're not only okay, they're doing very well. They're in a sphere of life that goes that is very expansive, and it is fascinating. You make the comment rising up in vibration, and as we rise up in vibration, that means that we can go to others of a similar nature and those who are teaching those of the level that we're on, and so we can go to their classes, we can go to their music events. We become more attuned to more inspirational music, which is constantly available. And we become more attuned to the beauty of art. We become more attuned to the beauty of nature. We become more attuned to the beauty of our higher self and where it's going, our destiny, with evolution.
I really wish that, my son, there'll be 3 years that Bella passed on July 20th this year. And I've encouraged my son to go to, there's some very well-known mediums that friends of mine.
Hollister Rand is one of them.
Who is it?
Hollister Rand in Los Angeles.
Hollister Rand, okay.
She's excellent.
Yeah, and
she's a student she's a student of James Van Praagh.
Oh, Hollister is a woman's name?
Hollister Rand.
Is that a woman?
Yes.
Oh.
And of course, Suzanne Giesemann does this, although she's focusing more on teaching classes now than having individual appointments. But there's a growing number of people who can help us make a connection. And so
I don't know why he's so resistant to that. A friend of mine lost her son very tragically, and she connected with this woman in LA and who told her things about her son that only she would know, So she was absolutely 100% positive that her son was coming to her through this particular medium. And I've encouraged Jim to do this because I think it would be wonderful to have that kind of support. And he just is not going there. I don't know.
Well, there's multiple reasons why. And the main reason why is because of the strong attachment to the five senses of the physical universe and not having explored enough in meditation or quiet times to be more sensitive to the fact that there are subtle areas of life, subtle levels of vibration. And the more we explore with that, the more convinced we become about the viability, the life that's present in these subtle forms. If you pay attention to why people care, why someone cares for you, and develop a deep sense of gratitude, you begin to rise up to some of these subtler levels in which way our lives are blessed. And if you start looking for what you're grateful for, you begin to identify more and more of what that feels like on a more frequent basis. And you slowly rise above the physical senses. And so, if he didn't have experiences like that, it would have been harder for him to realize that this could be a real experience that goes beyond anything he's had so far.
Well, he's a meditator, and he's had sessions with this medium in Switzerland that communicated with him about Bella and the astral hospitals and stuff. But anyway, that's my own personal, as his mother, I would truly love to, to have him have an experience about Bella. That is, unmistakably something from her. I think that would, the one thing that did happen, was he was at an outdoor restaurant in Austin. I guess this was last year. And they were talking about Bella, and a butterfly flew around his head several times, and then it went and kissed him right on the forehead. Boom.
Whoa.
Just like that. And then ended up on his finger.
Whoa.
On his finger. So he just knew. I mean, that's the only experience he's really had where he just absolutely knew that was Bella's way.
Oh, great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our time here. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today?
Well, I think the best way to prepare for death is to lead a good life. Yeah. And by leading a good life, that means taking care of the physical body, eating as well as you can, realizing that each time you take in food of various kinds, there's many hands that have participated in producing it and delivering it. And to be grateful. We used to have grace before meals when I was young. Is a marvelous attitude of gratitude that is worthwhile. And it blesses the body when we treat life as sacred.
Yes.
The more ways we can find life as sacred, being respectful of other people, even those with whom we disagree.
That's right.
Not allowing ourselves to get sucked in, not allowing ourselves to take the bait of a trigger of emotion, or a trigger of a belief we have, or some of our limited ways of thinking, and thinking, no, my way is right, your way is wrong.
Right.
And slowly improving our relationships as well as we can, trying to heal whatever ways we may have harmed others or made their life difficult, looking for ways to help those who need help that we can serve in some way or another. I think prepares us to be more aware of opportunities. Paying attention to the dream state sometimes makes it worthwhile. Yeah. Listening to wise people who want to teach us what they know so that we experience what they're telling us. That's what a wise teacher is. It doesn't do the work for us. It may answer some of our questions, but the real answers come from within ourselves as we make the effort to ask the question and humbly apply whatever we gain and learn about it. And as we slowly lead a better and better life, I think it makes it much easier to pass on. And it becomes a graceful exit and something we look forward to eventually. And know we'll be taken care of, and life will be even richer than ever.
Right. Well, to that, I want to say that I've come to this place of being present to the fact that everyone is divine, that everyone is a God being having a human experience. There is no exception. So to see them that way, despite their behavior, you don't have to have dinner with them or be their friend, but to see them as that high being that everybody is, raises them up. It raises up their frequency when you observe someone that way. So that's really how I'm choosing to really live my life and look at the people that trigger me and not go down that rabbit hole, because I know I can have a choice in the moment not to go down that rabbit hole. Joe Dispenza, I love him. Joe Dispenza's work. Yep. He says that emotion without the negative charge is called wisdom.
Yes.
So a memory, a memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. So we can remember something that somebody did to us, and we can remember, but then we can remember the lessons we learned from it and the wisdom that came from it without judging that person. So you've given us Live a Good Life. Would you say that would be a parting pearl of wisdom you'd like to leave with our audience, or is there something you'd like to say in addition to that?
Oh, I think so. I think that will do. I think any sincere request for help will be answered. Any sincere question, fear, apprehension, and wanting help, how to face it, whether it's visiting the doctor to get a diagnosis of something that you're afraid might be cancer, whether it's realizing my body is really deteriorating. Older age is not for the young, and I'm sorry I'm losing my vitality. I'm sorry I'm losing my capacity to interact, to get involved, to attend various things. Sincere appeal for patience, sincere appeal for support as the body deteriorates, I trust will be answered. And so that's what I would end with also, that there are friends on the other side, there's family on the other side. They know what's happening to us. They keep in touch with us, and they do everything they can to support us. And the more willing we are to trust the fact that life is much more full than we see, the more likely we'll receive the help that we look for.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, and congratulations on your new book, 2023. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just came out, and I encourage people to get it because there's not enough, I don't think, that's written about this today, especially about that those that leave us help to heal us. Yeah. And I think that's an important message. So thank you so much, Dr. Jim, for coming on board and today for Align with the Divine podcast. And I look forward to your work, your future work, and future books.
Thank you, Patricia, for having me on.
You're very welcome. All right. Take care now. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me today on Align with the Divine podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you'd like to learn more about my work, I invite you to my website, alignwiththedivine.net. And on the homepage, I'm giving away a free gift. It's a masterclass I did called The 7 Keys to Successful Manifesting. Pretty much lays out the bones of my work. Also, for a limited time only, between now and the end of August, just for the summer, I'll be giving complimentary tarot sessions, 30-minute sessions valued at $90. So if you're interested, reach out to me using my email, patricia@patriciadiorio.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again for joining me today, and namaste.